Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Not yet, almost. We're I think either this time or next time, we'll see how far we get today. That will be on the last of the final 13th principle of faith, which we started last week. All right, last week we started number 13, which is the belief of the resurrection of the dead. That's what the belief is, the resurrection of the dead. As we said, Ani ma'amin mamuna shalema, I believe with a complete faith, right? That there will be a resurrection of the dead, when it will be the will of from the creator of the world. Right? Right? And his mention forever, right? His name will be exalted, right? And mentioned forever and ever in eternity. Right? So we spoke about last week, just to recap very quickly, we spoke about last week the idea, right, of the concept of what resurrection of the dead really means. And that's what we spoke about. What does resurrection of the dead really mean? So we spoke about the concept of the physical body and the soul. And the resurrection of the dead is a proof, and why it's such a fundamental of the 13 principles of faith, that it's a proof that there's a correlation and there's a relationship between the physical body and the soul. And our purpose is to make our physical body something more spiritual. And therefore, by making it something a little more spiritual, right, we're able to make the body a spiritual beacon that will be able to be resurrected. And that's what we spoke about last week, and I don't want to go too far into it. If there's any questions afterwards, again, we're always open for questions. But that was the idea of last week, and then we spoke about that's why it's so important, the belief of the resurrection of the dead. What I want to speak about more this week is another concept of the resurrection of the dead, another important lesson and something that we have to reflect on from what this concept of the resurrection of the dead. So as we gave an introduction last time, and the resurrection of the dead, again, is something that's beyond chiyat hametim. It's something that's beyond the scope of our understanding. Right? We can't comprehend something like that because we don't have anything to compare it to. Right? What we see is people dying, and we don't see them resurrected. We don't see the chiyat hametim. We don't see them becoming back alive. It's a belief, something that we have to believe in. But it's not something that we could really comprehend. So the commentaries say that there's another important lesson to learn from the resurrection of the dead, right? And that is the idea of spirituality, right? The idea of an infinity, the idea of something that's beyond the scope of our knowledge. I was having a very pleasant conversation with someone a couple of days back, right, about faith. Right? Yeah, that's I have those conversations with people, many others, right? But about faith, and one of the things we spoke about is that scientists say it a certain way, and this is what we see, and this is how it has to be, and I don't want to go into too much details of our conversation because it could be a whole class within itself. But what I do want to bring out, and I've had this conversation from other people also, that the first initial reaction that we have as humans, and I'll be honest, me myself also, it's something that we have to constantly work on because we are within the realm of the physical world. The first reaction we have is, okay, show me the proof, right? Let's see it. Where is it in the physical world? Where can we compare it to something physical? And that's why we have a lot of times analogies. And that's why God manifests himself in a physical way. It says in the Torah, by the Exodus of Egypt, the Yad Hashem, the hand of God. It says the magicians of Egypt. Right? It said Etzba Elokim, a finger of God. Right? We have a concept of the wind of God going over the waters in the beginning of Genesis. There's many charon af, the anger of God. Right? There's many times where we see a manifestation of God in a physical way. And now, of course, God is not physical, and there's no concept of physicality by God. So what does it mean that we manifest God in a physical way? And the answer is because God, who created us in a physical form, placed the soul inside of ourselves, and that's what we spoke about last week. Right? But God that created us in a physical form knows that we need to have some form of physical manifestation for us to be able to connect with. We need to have something to connect with. We're not all spiritual, and therefore, we can't say, well, yeah, it's all spiritual, and it's all. We have to have some kind of physical connection. We have to have something that we could connect with on a physical level. That being said, we understand that it's just a manifestation of God, right? That God is giving us a glimpse of a part, a minuscule, just a little bit of what God is for us to be able to connect with. But of course, it's way beyond the scope of our comprehension. But at least we have something to grab on. We have something to hold on. We have something to connect with. Once we have that something to connect with, then we could start exploring the unknown. We could start exploring something that's beyond our comprehension. First of all, this is an important, very important point to always remind ourselves that yes, there is an idea that we have to, as spiritual as we want to make ourselves, right, and as lofty as we want to make ourselves, we have to realize that on a physical level, we have to have something to hold on to, something to connect with, to say that I'm connecting to the relationship of something beyond the scope of my comprehension. And therefore, if you notice any sci-fi movies, anything that is created, there is a hint of something that we know about, right? Something that we could comprehend. When we make aliens, right, that we make them in a form of something that we're connected. We can't create something that's beyond the scope of our comprehension. We can't imagine it. Right? So, or to create the concept of traveling through time or superheroes or whatever it is, it's something that is still something connected to something physical. Because something that's beyond the scope of anything physical, it's impossible for us to comprehend. It's impossible for us to connect with. And not to get too off topic, but the commentaries say that's what it means that when Moses, and Moshe Rabbeinu asked God, right, show me your ways, right, Harein Kodecha, show me your ways, means to say, show me, God, he just inaugurated the Mishkan, he was on a high, lofty level, and God said, Panai Loro, you won't see my front, Acharai, my back, you could see. You could see my back, but Panai, my face, my front, you can't see. Say the commentaries, what does that mean? Say the commentaries, it means to say that the front, the all spiritual, the lofty concept of infinity, of something that has no scope of physical, the essence of God, no, we can never connect with. Moshe Rabbeinu, even on his highest level, he was up in heaven for 40 days and 40 nights. But once he was back in the physical realm, once he was back to something physical, Panai Loro, you will not be able to see my face. Acharai, my back. Say the commentators, what do you mean the back of God? It means to say the concept of connecting to something that's a little physical, connecting it to a minuscule of physicality, analogy, a reflection, a manifestation of something physical that you could see and that you could expand from. So why am I speaking about this so much? The reason is because I want us to remember that the idea of the resurrection of the dead, many people have many different explanations. Many people believe it in many different ways. Some people don't believe it at all, right? They don't believe in the resurrection of the dead. I was having a conversation with someone. Say, well, we believe that the resurrection of the dead and the Messianic era, right, is more of a time where we perfect ourselves and we become better and a utopia. Not actually a new time, not actually a change in reality. We have to realize that Tchiyat HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, Messianic era, is something that's beyond our comprehension. We make it in a physical way. We say that the bodies the bones will rise up, as the prophet says in the Haftorah that we read on the holiday of Passover, of Pesach. The bones will come up and the skin will grow back on. We say these things, and it's possible that that's what's going to happen, and it's most likely it will. But we say it because we need to be able to connect to this idea, start connecting it in a physical way. So what's a spiritual thing that we have to then take on, and the lessons that we have to learn nowadays and to grow? Because everything that we know and everything that any knowledge we have, it's something that we have to grow and grow, become better. What is it? So again, last week we spoke about the idea of remembering that our physical body is here to become more spiritual. Today I want to speak about the idea, the point that we're making, that there is a spiritual realm. There is an idea of spirituality in the world. We talk about it, we say it, we even believe it, but we're lacking in our belief. We're all lacking in belief. That's why we're here. We have an evil inclination that's fighting us all the time. But we're lacking in our belief. Because if we truly, truly believed and we truly connected to this idea of there's a spiritual world and the physical world is just a cover-up of the spiritual, if we truly believed that there is going to be a utopia, a spiritual utopia, and we will be coming back and all the past history, all the great righteous people. And as we had a question and answer at the end of last, what is righteous and what's not righteous? That's not for us to judge. It's each person on their growth level. And we're not going into that. God decides. But everybody comes back. It would probably be crowded, but that's not the point because it's not a physical manifestation. We have a physical concept, but it's a spiritual thing. We put it in a physical way, but it's going to be a spiritual thing. And when we start reflecting, and when we start thinking about that there's a spiritual force in the world, when we start realizing that the physical forces that we have are just a manifestation of the spiritual that's actually controlling everything, then we will actually start changing our ways. Then we will start actually really focusing on what's important and what's not important. And it's something that I'm working on also, I'll be honest with you. We're all working on it. And if anybody tells you they're not, they're lying to you. Because we are part physical. Because this is my physical hand, right? This is my physical body. And we connect the physicality. Our initial reaction, the thing we fall back to, our fallback point, is our physical. That's our fallback point. That's it, just the way it is. It's our fallback point. So we have to work double hard. We have to instill in ourselves that there is something spiritual. Excuse me. We have to work on and develop that there's a spiritual realm out there. There's something beyond the scope of our comprehension. And you can say, well, that's just like dreaming. That's just to make yourself comfortable and to comfort yourself, to try to answer questions, or to just say that because since logically you can't understand it, and just because you can't prove it, or it might not be fitting with the morals of our society. That's just your excuse. That's your go-to thing. That's how you feel, but that's not true. There's a spiritual force, and yes, we don't know everything. You're going to tell me that in the physical world you know everything? I love it when people tell me, like we just said, well, prove it. Prove that the Torah is true. Prove this, prove that. Prove that there's a God. Prove that God created the world. Prove there's no evolution. Prove all these things. And we have an intellectual conversation. And there's very strong ideas, very strong proofs. But at the same time, they're coming from an initial reaction of what they look at things in the physical world. I want to ask them, you prove that there's evolution. You prove that the world is certain years old. Based on what? So take it back. Where's your initial basis? Because a theory that we developed. Where's that theory come from? How do you prove that there's that there's the laws of gravity. How does laws of gravity work? So I dropped something and it falls. But how do I know how that works? Do I know everything? Do we know everything in the physical world? We know how to manipulate it. We know how to develop it. Do we know exactly how it works? So we have theories. Is theories 100% proof? But that's okay, because most scientists agree to a certain theory. Most philosophers agree to a certain idea, a certain moral code now. It's important to have moral codes, and I believe in science. And I'm not knocking it. But what I am saying is, why do you give more leeway? Why do we give more leeway to science and philosophy on where they are working on probability or they're working on theories than spiritual theories, the Torah theories? That we have to prove 100%. Oh no, that we have to, without a doubt, we can't have any doubt. Of course there's doubt. There's always doubt, and everything is doubt. There are even people, I was talking to someone yesterday, of course it's a small minority, but the famous line, 1 + 1 is not 3, right? Who's going to argue with that? How do I know? Okay, there's a whole mathematical equation to prove it. I don't know it, I'll be honest. But there's doubts. There's people that believe the man never landed on the moon. There's people that believe a lot of different things. Could you prove it without a shadow of a doubt? Could you prove without a shadow of a doubt that I'm talking to you right now? Maybe I pre-recorded and I have a camera here and recording it to you. And it looks like it's live. It is live to you. But how do you know I'm actually talking to you? I am. But how do you know? How do we know everything for certain? But we have a fallback. Then when we're in the physical realm, there's certain things that we know. There's certain things that we just assume based on probability, based on majority, based on how things generally work. And they become fact. That's just the way it is. So why can't we do the same thing for the spiritual world? No, it's spiritual. No, God. I think this is an important lesson that we're learning from the resurrection of the dead. This Ani Maimonides Shalema. I believe there will be this idea of the resurrection that defies the laws of nature. There's all these sci-fi movies, right, or TV shows of scientists and billionaires that are trying to develop a pill and a lifestyle or the certain thing that will give them life forever, immortality. And there's pills and there's this and there's that. The only thing they have of people coming back to life are zombies. Right? But the idea of a fully functioning, the idea of a real concept of someone coming, it's beyond our scope. It's beyond our scope. Says Maimonides, considered one of the greatest philosophers of Jewish history, the secular world, the religious world, a doctor, a physician, someone that was involved in the science of the world. Says Maimonides, his 13 principles of faith, I believe that there's a resurrection of the dead. It defies the laws of nature, defies anything that's scientifically proven, defies all concepts of medicine. Says Maimonides himself, this is the last one he mentions to us, the 13th, my friends, there is a spiritual world out there that you also have to work with. There is. I believe there's a spiritual world out there. I believe that we have to work with and digest and work with probability and majority and statistics of the concept of spirituality, just as we do with the physical world. So when you give a proof that the Torah is true based on probability of something, when you speak about the concept of the creation of the world, the probability of something happening by itself. And again, I'm no expert in these topics. I just know some stuff from hearing other people talk about it and studying it a little bit myself. People that are much more worthy to talk about these important issues. But one thing I could tell you, that we have to come in with a mind of realizing that the same burden of proof, same level of truth and that we give to the physical world, that's how it is. We have to do the same thing at least the same for the spiritual world. Something that's beyond the physical. At least give the same for that. I think that's another important lesson that we have to learn from. Maimonides himself. Maimonides says that I believe that there will be a resurrection when it will be his will, when it will come up from the creator of the world, when it will be his will, there will be a resurrection. There will be a tchiyat hamesim. And then how does he finish off? Right? And his name will be exalted, his mention forever and ever. Why is Maimonides only mention this over here? Zichro, remember, la'ad, l'neitzach netzachim. His name will be remembered forever and ever. Why on this one? Why not by the coming of the Mashiach does he mention this? We asked this last week, we didn't answer it. Why over here? So I saw this idea that in this one, the last one, and in this one that speaks about, again, something that is beyond the scope. Okay, a world to come, right? Okay, it's beyond our scope, but it's not something that we're saying in the physical world, right? Is something spiritual, right? Mashiach's coming. Okay, Messianic era. Right? That's someone that was born now, and someone that will, of course, we believe that it's an all spiritual thing. One could sort of rationalize it. God forbid, not saying we are. But the resurrection, that's the final nail, that's the final nail saying, no, there is in the physical world, in the concept of a physical thing, there has to be spiritual. Therefore, it says Maimonides, when we start believing in this idea, then spirituality is infinity. Spirituality doesn't work with the concept of time. We spoke about this many times. That spirituality does not work with the concept of time. Spirituality works with the concept of infinity. There is no concept of time. So if we strengthen our belief in this period of time, in the physical world, then God's name will be exalted. It will be forever and ever, because there is no time for it to ever end. There is no time for it to ever end. Because spirituality is infinity. Spirituality is forever. So we believe that even in the physical world, it could be on forever. Then God's name will be exalted forever and ever. Because we believe that it will be forever and ever, because in the physical world, we can make it into something spiritual. And that's how it connects to what we spoke about last week. Because when we make it the physical spiritual, now it has the properties of spirituality and will be forever and ever. But we have to believe that there is a concept of spirituality. We have to make sure we work on it to remind ourselves that there is an idea of spirituality. It's like, it reminds me, of when, you talk to your children or your nephews and nieces or to kids about ideas that are beyond their scope. And you have the initial conversation about different scientific things, different economic things, and different things that whatever topic that's beyond their scope. And I say, really? Yeah. How do you know? Because it's something it's mind-boggling for them, something that they can't connect with. because they haven't had that reality yet hit them. They haven't had that connection with it at all. Now it's getting less and less because with all tablets and phones and everything, kids know so much more. And their imagination so much crazier. But it's the same thing. We are like children. And the physical world, even in the physical world, we know a tipa shebayam. We know like a drop in the ocean. We're constantly studying more. We're constantly finding out more about the human body and about this outer space and about the depth of our own oceans, about the different jungles. We're still figuring out more, and then we think we know everything, and then something snaps at us. And we try to prove physically how this happened, how that happened, if it was this, it was that, it was man-made, it was natural, it was this, and we have to find different antidotes. But let us be honest, we don't know everything in the physical world. God is just telling us, hey, wake up, you don't know everything. So how can you go ahead and say without a shadow of a doubt how the world was created? Without a shadow of a doubt, how man came to be. Without a shadow of a doubt that certain things that happened thousands of years ago didn't happen or did happen. We don't even know now how things are happening. Right now, with all our technology, with all our scientists, with all the history of science, science constantly changes itself. Constantly. What they believed 200 years ago, they don't believe now. Some of it they do, some of it they don't. Always a new journal about disproving this and a new theory and a new this. And again, I'm not, God forbid, talking about science, just to reiterate. I believe in it. I believe that God created science for us to recognize the glory of God. And we have to learn science, and we have to know how the world works, and we have to make sure that we keep the world safe and healthy. It's incumbent upon us. God gave us to be the caretakers of the world. We have to make sure that we keep the environment safe. And we have to study how it works to the best of our knowledge. The point I'm just trying to bring out that we can't say that this is a definitive way of how it works, and therefore there cannot be spirituality. Let's reflect internally and say, hey, I don't know everything. And the same struggles that we struggle with in the spiritual world, let's struggle with in the physical world. We might have a little more evidence. It's something that's more tangible for us to work with. But at least admit we don't know everything. And then if there's a clash, let's try to figure it out. And it's not my line, but I always try to say we figure out how science works with the Torah, not how Torah works with science. Torah has been around much longer. It's consistent, hasn't changed. It's gone through many different struggles, and we have the same Torah. So let's see how science works with the Torah. And of course, we have to figure it out. We have to strengthen our belief and our emunah. But let's not say that it's definitive this way. We don't know so many things. And let's give spirituality at least the same credit that we give the physical world. That is probable. And just because we don't know everything, it doesn't mean to say that it's not like that. Just because you don't have proof doesn't mean to say that it's not. You have to have proof that it's not. And that's why, as I mentioned in the past, I don't believe that there's anybody that's a true atheist or a true believer. And yes, I'm on record. We're all agnostics. It's not my line. I've read it many places. We're all agnostics. We're all just holding on different levels of agnostics. Some of us are closer to not believing. Some of us are closer to believing. And some of us are somewhere in the middle. Some of us are closer to the middle, and some of us are closer to either end. Because we cannot prove there is no God. Are we around by the creation? Do we have a video of how it was created? Do we have any true documents? We have the Torah. So let's figure out if the Torah is true or not true. Let's work on it. Do you have proof that it's not true? You have a theory. You have a way of explaining different things to say that it's maybe not true. And there's ways of proving that it is true. So there's a back and forth. So at least let's just give the same level of how we deal with the physical world to the spiritual world. We have to strengthen our belief in the spirituality. We have to strengthen our belief that there is spirituality. And if we have a hard time with it, at least let's give it the same level of importance and how we deal with the physical world of proof. At least let's give it the same as spiritual. So I think that's an important lesson to learn from Maimonides himself, as we said, a physician, a philosopher, but more importantly, a tzaddik and a Torah scholar, one of the greatest rabbis of our times. As it's famous saying, from Moses until Moses, there wasn't like a Moses. From Moshe Rabbeinu until Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, there wasn't anybody like him. There wasn't another Moshe like him. And he himself says that there is a resurrection, that in the physical world there's something spiritual that we can't explain. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to now stop the recording.